Okay, so hi guys, hi Neeraj, buddy. Okay, so let's wait for a few more minutes, then we can start with the session. Yeah, hi Piyush, Amol, Himanshu. Hi Sudarshan, Satish. Yeah, actually, in the previous session, there was some discrepancy, so we'll be adding that. But in this session, we have I've already added the GitHub repository link and all the relative links, so you can check it out. On change event. Okay, so we'll be having a separate session for like handling all the events and managing the states according to that. Okay. Okay, so I guess we can start the session. It's okay, so let's just wait for a minute. Okay, so till then, if anybody can confirm, like, is there any background noise or am I audible clearly? Okay, so how many projects? Okay, so it's not about the project, it's about like understanding the concepts and implementing them in the end, right? So, okay, so video flickering. Just a second. Let me check my cam. Okay, so I guess the video is better. I don't know if it is flickering or what's the reason. Okay, so the topics which we have covered. So, with like in the first four sessions, we have covered the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And in the past two lectures, we have covered the basics of React and JSX and React elements. Okay, so let's get started with this session. Okay, so in this particular session, we are going to talk about the React components and props. So for me, like it is the most important topic, which we should know, like if we are going to develop apps in the React. Okay, so let's get started with this. Okay, so in previous two sessions of React, like in the first session, we have covered all these topics. So you can like I mentioned the link in the description box, so you can go ahead with that. And in the yesterday's session, we have covered the JSX and React elements. Okay, so in this session, we are going to talk about the component and props and how should we be thinking in the React. Okay. Okay, so like before moving with the component, so React is just a JavaScript library for building the UIs, but we have JavaScript, HTML, CSS, which does the same thing, right? But why are we using React or libraries and frameworks like Angular or libraries like React? Why are we using them? Because in HTML, CSS, we have to create UIs we have to specify all the DOM instructions and all of that stuff. But in React, React simplifies those steps. We have to just write the core logic, nothing. The DOM instructions are executed by the React itself. Okay, so moving forward with the first topic, which is components. Okay, so first of all, like what is component? Before that, like React is all about components, right? Like I have said it in every lecture. So React is all about components. So why? Because if we are considering like from the user interfaces, so user interfaces in the end, consists of just the components, multiple different components. Okay, so okay, so think let's keep React just a bit apart. Let's think about any other programming language, maybe JavaScript. I guess the screen is visible in the content. Okay, so I have created a playground and a normal JavaScript file. Let's see. Let's see the console here. So it is rendering true. Let's see the logic behind it. Okay. So so in this what we are doing, we have created two functions, and we are invoking validate number here. Okay, and we are passing a certain parameter. So what are these functions doing exactly? So these functions are, we are creating functions. So let's say we have this sanitize function itself, but we are creating, different functions, so that every function should have only one focus, only one task, only one certain task to do. So let's say all of these functions are reusable, right? If I want to sanitize number in any other function, I can just call this function and sanitize the number accordingly, right? So I'm passing 12 here. So what it is doing, like first it is going to this function, then it is returning something, then we are checking like whether it is a number or something else, right? So we can see like it is rendering true or accordingly. So if it is like, some string, it is returning false step by step, right? So why are we doing this? Because we are, creating, reusable functions. Similarly, like with the React, we intend to create, a function, components basically, because React is all about components, right? So we are creating the components in a very granular way. So like we have, created separate different units, separate different codes, so that each function has only one focus, has only one certain task, so that it is easy to maintain and manage those components, right? So, okay, so let's move forward. All right. So like, how do we build the components in React? So like we build components by combining HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then we can combine those components, to build our complete user interfaces. Okay. So components are just like JavaScript functions. Now, what's make them special is like they return React elements describing what should appear on the screen. So in like yesterday's session, we talked about the React elements. Okay. So elements and components are different things. Like components are made up of one or multiple React elements. Okay, so basically, yeah, in components, what we do, we just write our core logic. We just define the desired state, and in the end, like it is all up to the React, like how it is rendered in the optimized way. So we have two kind of components, which is class-based components and functional components. So in this session, or like throughout the course, we are going to talk about the functional components. Okay. Now, function components. What are function components? So function components are literally JavaScript functions which may take certain inputs and work on it. Okay. So let's say we have this code, right? So this is the code which we have implemented so far. So I've already run the development server. Okay. So in this, like we have this file, right? And we are importing the app in the index.js using this. Okay. So we have this code. So this is also a component. We have, defined a constant and wrote some code here, right? But let's say if we have, a lot of code, like we are implementing certain things, right? So let's consider one thing. So let's say we have this UI. Okay. So like if you are going to think in a React way, what does it mean? Like this is a header. It contains subheader. We have this featured section. We have this quick link section. We have these article cards, and we have this featured articles section, what's new, recommended, and the footer. So and this pagination also. So if you are going to like build this using the React, so we have multiple components which we have to implement, right? So if we put all of this code in a single file, it will be, very tedious and cumbersome. So it will be very hard to maintain. So that's why we are using components here. Okay. So, and React elements can also represent user-defined components. So let's say we have defined some components. So React elements can contain just those components. So for instance, we have this. We have this const element. We are like assigning it just a user-defined component. Like app is a user-defined component, right? So if we do this and save, let's see what's the output. You will see like it will produce the same output because we are assigning a variable like a component, a user defined component. Okay, so let me undo it. Okay, so components can refer, to other components in their output. A component can contain multiple components. So what does that mean? So let's say if we have, a main component which contains sidebar, which contain, sidebar items. So a component tree is formed. So if you look at a sample component tree, so let's say we have this project, we are building the expense tracker, right? So we have this like app which may contain the sidebar component. The sidebar component may contain like the sidebar items, so that we are splitting our UI into smaller pieces of code. Okay. So and each piece of code has their own specific task. Like we have the all expenses page, right? Which in turn contain a lot of like expense items. So we have expense item here. So a component tree is formed in the end. So if we want to see the component tree, we can do that. Okay. So I have installed the React Developer Tools. Okay. So if you see, like in this, the official website of React, so like it is built on top of React. So and it contains, a lot of components here. So we can see the like here the component hierarchy here, the component tree. So the bigger applications can have, a lot of components inside components. A nesting level can be, any much, it can be deeper to up to any level. Okay. So we are going to make use of those concepts. Okay. And we can split our components into many smaller components. Okay. And this is the main thing like we have to keep in mind. So while defining a component, it should always start with, uppercase alphabet, because like React, does not uses any sort of special way, just the naming convention. So like if tag is starting with the uppercase letter, so React makes it like it is a user defined component, not the usual HTML tag. Okay, so we have to keep in mind while using that. And we have some benefits like the reusability. We don't have to write, as much as code, because let's say we have, 10 HTML files if we are using the traditional way, and each of these files contain the header. So we don't have to write, write the like if we have to change certain link in the header file, we don't have to write that code in each and every file. So in React, we have to just, if we have created a component, we just have to, change in one file and it will be reflected in all of the pages. And the separation of concerns. So by separation of concerns, what do we mean? Like if we are splitting our code, so like we are making, small pieces of code, like each component has their own specific task, which increases, which enhances the readability and also, allows us to easy configuration and maintenance. Okay. So I guess enough about the theory. I guess. Okay. So if you guys have any issues there or like any questions, you can put it down. Okay. So let's move with the coding part. Okay. So we have done this so far. We have created a sidebar, right? This sidebar here. Okay. So let's split the code into the components. Okay. So we have this components folder. Let's create a sidebar folder. Like as you can see, like I am creating a sidebar folder with S capital. Okay. Now this contain a single file. So I'm creating a function component, right? Function sidebar, which is returning something, which is nothing with the JSX code. Okay. Now we have to export it so that we can import it in other files and make use of it. So now what we can do, we can cut all the code from here and put it in. So you can format the code, you can install the plugin. So now let's save it. Okay, so before saving it, we have to import this. while you are writing, you can like have a separate plugin so that it will be easily imported. Okay, so let's save it and see. It is compiling. So now, as you can see, we are getting some error here. Right, it is not okay. Like the sidebar list is not defined in this. Why? Because like we have sidebar list in this in the scope of this component only, and we are using different component here, right? So we have a way like we can pass this constant to that particular component. But for now, let's cut that and paste it here so that you can see. Okay. So as we can see, like it is just as before, like the thing we have created, but like we have created a separate component for this, so that like we don't have to, basically the separation of concerns here. Okay, so we can also create another component in sidebar file. Okay, so let's create another sidebar list so that every item in the sidebar is taken from another component. We are just splitting the code into multiple pieces, and make sure like you name it like you like the first letter should be uppercase. Okay, is returning something. So what goes in here? So it's just this li tag because we are using a list here, right? But as you see, like we have some constant here, right? So let's copy this. For now, we are going to separate it. Okay, and let's delete this code, and we can import this. The name was sidebar list item, right? Right. So now if you see, the application just contain the ad expenses, right? So if we want to like make use of like this component multiple times, we can do that. So let's say we have this, we can use it any multiple times. But is this component really reusable? Voice is low. Is it better now? Okay. So like we have like used this component 3 times. So, but is this component really reusable? I don't think so. Like because like all the data like which we want to render is baked inside this particular component. This is a child component, right? But like we don't want this kind of data. We want the dynamic data. So how can we do that? How can we make it really reusable? So we have a concept which is props. Okay, so let's move to that concept and see what it does. Okay, I hope like components are clear. What does it mean? Okay, so props stand for properties. Now props are just arguments which are passed into the React component. So as we have like discussed, like and function components are nothing but just JavaScript functions, right? So JavaScript functions take arguments, right? Similar with the component, the function components can take arguments. So like they can take arguments and work on it, right? So props are immutable. By immutable, we means like if we are passing a data from parent to child, okay. So the child should not configure that data, okay. can be passed from child to the child components like HTML attributes. We are going to look into that, and it has the same syntax. Okay, so let's say, okay, so we can do one thing. Let's remove this, and this component, when we are like invoking this, we can, you know, we can just give it a name of item. This name can be anything. Okay, and we are doing what we are doing, we're just initializing it the 0th index. Okay, so let's give this an index of 1. Okay, so this is just like the HTML attributes, right? So let's say we have this with class name this, right? Similarly, like we have this custom built component which have this prop item. So how can we access it? So this functional component takes only one. Like we can like if you say like it can take multiple arguments. No, it can take just one argument. So we usually name it props. So like while we are using inside the function, like if we see anywhere like prop, so we should know like it is coming from the parent. Okay, so just for like keeping in mind. Okay, so how can we access it? So first log it, like what are we getting here? So till then we can hide this code because otherwise it will produce errors. Just a normal level. Okay, let's see. Okay, we have one different. Oh shit. We should be sidebar list. Let's see. So as you see, like React has not refreshed the page, just updated the content. Okay, so we are receiving these props. Okay, so and we have sent just a single item, right? So which is like containing the name, path, and icon. So we can make use of this by making use of the dot notation. Okay, so inside this, we can remove this and unhide this part, and we are receiving the props, right? So how can we access it? So we know like in props, like as we see here, like the props contain an item, right? So what we can do, we can replace all the indexes with props dot item dot path, or like whatever we want to render, like the path, the icon, the name, right? So let's save it and see what we get now. So as you can see, like whatever we are passing, we are passing the data down to the child from parent to child. It's basically sending the data. It can be asynchronous. So let's say if we have a asynchronous call, like promises, waiting it for the for it to resolve or reject. So we can do this like in any way. Currently we have the static data, right? So we have this, right? So there's one more thing. Okay, so let's say we have this and dynamically it is updated. Currently we can't update it because we are not using any internal state here, but let's add one more list item. So let's say it is called analytics. Okay, the path is slash analytics. Just we're taking it for the demonstration purposes. And icon is maybe analytics itself. We have this icon in the material icon CDN. Okay, so if we save it, you see like the output is same as before. Like a list item is not added because we have only two list items. So how do we make it dynamic? Because like if we have a dynamic element, dynamic sidebar list, and we have to add multiple items on the go, how do we do that? Because this is really not feasible. We have to add each and every sidebar list item. We have to add three, four. There can be any number of items, right? So how do we do that? Let me show you a trick here. Okay. So let's say we have a variable prices. Okay, it contains, I don't know, some numbers, and let's render this. Okay, prices. Let's see the output of this. Okay, so if we see like the array is rendered, right? Why it is rendered? Like it should at least throw error or something like that. It is because like it is a JavaScript functionality. If we try to print the array, it will concatenate all the elements here. Okay, so we have this. Let's say we have something else. Let's say we have even the elements. Okay, so let's create an element. Okay, using the React way. Okay, so let's say we have a P with no configurations and the input is one, here two. Okay, so let's see how it works now. Okay, so React is not defined. Okay, so use the create element. We have to import the React. So I guess imported. Yeah, now it is imported. Okay, so now we see. Okay, there are certain errors. Okay, so these are the previous errors we are having. Let's refresh it and see. Because I'm going to talk about this error in a moment. Okay. So till now, like you can see, like we have this paragraph tag containing all those the content we intend to render it, right? So if we go back to this component, so we can see like all the things we are having can be rendered here. Okay. So let's create another thing here. Sidebar list items. Let's try to transform by making use of the map function, which is the ES6 feature, right? So we can do that. We have this sidebar list. Okay, so it's basically we are rendering a list. Okay, so whatever we have in the list, it will be rendered on the screen. We can make use of map. It takes three parameters. First is item, second is the index, and third is the array, which we don't require here. So let's give that. Okay, so now we have this. Now we can do one thing. We can return the JSX element here. Okay, so which is what? Which is our sidebar list item. Which takes item as a prop. You can send the item here, right? Let's see if we try to print it instead of this. What do we have? What have we done? List items. Okay. Okay. So let's see. Okay. Yep. Great. So we can render like all the elements that we have. Okay, I don't know why it is throwing error. We have removed the prices array, right? Okay, so we have this list, right? So it is rendered dynamically, like all the items we have in the list, it is rendered accordingly. Like all the icons, all the path, all the naming we have, right? So we have this here. We can even like short it. So we can even remove this because we are just returning it here, right? So that's why arrow functions are very nicer than the normal functions. We can just use this. Okay, so we have this. Okay, yeah, it works in the same way. Like we are just returning some JSX code. We can put it in a single line if we don't have multiple lines. Okay, so if we see like we have the same output as before. Okay, so this is like assigning things to a variable. But like in the previous session, we have studied like we can put the valid JavaScript expressions and even execute them inside the JSX code. Okay, so we can put this code inside the JSX code as well. So let's comment this inside the curly braces, obviously. Okay, so in this we have to explicitly, I guess, define this so that it can be returned. Okay, so it's just working fine. Let's do some indentation. It is showing the error. Just a second. Okay, yeah. I guess now it's fine. Let's save it and see. Okay, I guess the same output as before because we can really embed the JSX expression, like the JavaScript expressions in here. Okay, now look at the error. Let's look at the error we are getting in the console. Okay, so we are getting this error like each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So what do we mean by that? Okay, so in React, like React's work on the virtual DOM, then interact with the real DOM, right? So by unique key, it means like you have to assign, like if you are rendering a list by making use of loop or by, you have an array of elements and you are rendering that, you have to make use of key prop. You have to define a key on each and every elements, the outer element. So by outer element we mean this, like let's say if we have nested elements, we have to define on the top level element, so we have to define this prop. Okay, so now like what values does this prop accept? So if we define a constant value, so it does not make any sense, right? Because each and every element should have a unique key prop as the error like specified, like list should have a unique key prop, right? So what can be key prop? So let's say we have a list, if we have dynamic list, so it can have maybe id, or you can even use the index or generate a random number, but make sure like it is really random. Okay, so let's define this an index, which the index we are getting from here, and let's save it. Now if we see, it is not reloading by itself. Okay, so we see like the error is gone, right? So like why do we really require that key prop? So that like React can really identify that particular list item, and let's say whenever there is any modification or update, so like React can only update that particular element. It does not have to like go through each and every list item and check each of them and even update them. So like due to like maybe doing some particular optimizations, we have like this is due to the optimization part. Okay, so we are using this. Okay, so we can even hide this for now, otherwise it will throw you a warning like sidebar list item is assigned but never used. So we can comment it down. Okay, so just putting all this up here so that you can use that as a reference. Okay, so we'll be pushing the complete code onto the GitHub repository. Okay, so we have this. So as you can see, like we have splitted our code into various different components here, right? So this is just for the sidebar, like we have the expense or list, right? So we can create that as well. So as you can see, like, okay, so in this particular component, so this in this particular component, we are just receiving the props, right? So we are not doing any, any sort of manipulation or something like that. We are just receiving the props and rendering them. So this kind of component is known as stateless components because we are not doing any sort of state management here. But we will be doing some state management maybe in the sidebar file, in parent file, where like wherever we are managing the states, it will be known as stateful components. So regarding the states, we are going to cover the states in the next session along with the form handling. Okay. So one more thing, like in the JavaScript session, we learned about destructuring, right? So we can use that here. So like in this, like we have to do that props dot item dot path. So it can be multiple, like props may contain object, which may contain object. So like we can reduce that nesting. We can just put the curly braces, and we know like we are receiving an item here, and we can use the rest operator to to catch all the rest of the properties. So now we have this item. So instead of props dot item, we can just make use of item here. Okay. So that is also a cool thing which we can do and makes our code a bit more simplified. Okay, so let's save it and see. Okay, cool. So we are having a list with no errors so far and all the items we have, right? Great. Okay, so we are going to build the expense component. Okay, and one more thing, yeah. Okay, so we are defining a function sidebar list item here, right? So in JavaScript, we have the arrow function concept, right? So we can make use of that here, the arrow functions, and we'll be using the arrow functions in all the functional components. Because I don't know, it seems to be like a bit cool and simpler syntax here. So we can even remove this. Let me save it. You can see the same output as before with no error whatsoever. Right, great. Okay, so we have created this sidebar list item. We can split it them into various multiple components. So let's do the same for we have this application, right? Okay, so this is the application that I have built so far. So let me zoom it out. So we have this list which contains a box which in turn has a heading, the amount, and all the list items. So if we have to think it in a React way, what we can do, we can have a box. This is basically a single page, right? The expense page, which in turn has a heading, a pill which contains the amount, and all the list items which we are fetching from the Firebase Firestore, right? So how can we split it? We can have a page which contains this component, which is dynamic, right? We have done with the sidebar list items. So we can do that in the similar way. So let's do it. Okay. So I've already, defined some classes in the style section. We are going to go through that. Okay, so first we can write the dummy code here. If you guys have any sort of problems or like the questions, you can put it in the section. We'll be answering that along with the coding. Okay, we have the layout container. Uh, it's text box which holds our heading. Okay. Mm, the main heading. Just three expenses, right? And we can have a fill, which is basically the amount we are having, the complete amount, and we are specifying some class in here, which is fill info. So maybe INR, I don't know. Initially it will be zero, right? So let's see how it looks. Not that great, I guess. Okay, so we have to wrap it inside one more container. This is the outer container which we are having. How it looks. Okay. Not that great, I guess. Let me look at the CSS. Okay, so we have this CSS layout container, position relative, and we have specified some margin because we have the sidebar. So to display the content in the main viewport, I have shifted it to the margin left of 17.5%. And we have this, which will give us a nice looking box. So let's copy this and use this here. So let's save and see. It is not updating. Okay, so I'll zoom in, that's why, I guess. It's fine. Okay. So we have this justify flex contain, and the width should be 100%, right? So let's specify the width also. 100%, and let's see. Now better. Okay, and we can specify some, some margin here. So we have given some margin. Okay, so let's skip this one off. Let's add, let's say like this button is taking like the default value, which is stretch, right? So we can make it a less stretch and define the property, which is flexbox line baseline, I guess. So now it's visible. Let's have a horizontal tag. We have to close this tag even. Okay, let's say, so we have this horizontal line, and now we have to render these list items. So how can we do that? Let's create a sample list item first, then we can create it as a separate component and then import it. Okay, so let's say we have a div with class name layout container expenses, which in turn contain a list and a list item here, right? So let's say we have a list item. Let's specify a class. Maybe we want it to be a flexbox and all the content, like let's say we have multiple contents and we want to have this kind of space. So what we can do, like keeping this as a flexbox and this as a flexbox, and we can specify the content, like we have to align the space in between. So we can do flexbox justify between, I guess. And in there we can have multiple divs. Like you can specify some classes, flexbox, yes, and one more class. Okay, so in this, what we want to have, like this particular date and the title. Okay, so let's start with the title. We have h3, the class name, I guess. The title, let's say it has a title, maybe grocery expense, I guess. Let's save it in C. Okay, great. So we are having a list which is basically containing a title, right? So, and in this div, we want that particular amount here, right? This particular pill. So what we can do, we can define also flexbox, because we are having multiple divs, like the amount, the edit button, and the delete button here, right? So what we can do, we can define this as flexbox, align center, because we want to align all the items in the center. And we can define the price. Okay, so let's say the grocery item 324 INR. Okay, so let's say and see. Yeah, looking better than before, right? And let's say we want to have that calendar thing. What we can do, we have this. So we want to wrap this like we are stacking it on top of each other, right? We can either display, make use of block level elements, or we can define a box, which is, nothing but a flexbox container. So let's define a flexbox here also, which is basically a column. The direction is column here. Okay. So, and it basically kind of like all the items are center aligned. Okay. Center, and we may be having last name of, like with this contain the a month, right? So maybe have named it this. This contain the date, which is 14th, or you can put it any, just for the dummy data. Okay, and one more class here, which I might have used in the CSS. Okay, so let's see. Okay, great. So we have this basic like a list item, right? So we can just cut this code. Okay. And, okay. So first, like let's cut the complete code here, and let's define a component and use it here. Okay. So we have this layout container. Let's define a page here, which is expensive. Okay. And it contains a index file. Let's define a component. Okay. A page basically. Expenses, which takes an argument, which is nothing for now, and return some JSX code. So we also need to define a export statement so that we can use it in the expenses. We can import it here, expenses. So we have imported it from the pages, right? So we have this here. We can further split it down. Okay, so let's split it down. Okay, so this is a kind of a component here, right? So let's create a folder, expense item, which is in the index.js file. Expense item, which may be taking some props and then returning this. We have to mark it as exported item. Expense item here. Okay. Let's make use of that expense item here. Okay, so we have imported this from the components. Okay, so the cool thing is, let's say we have this folder, right? So we have the index.js file in here. So by default, like if you named it as index.js, you don't have to explicitly mention it. So it will automatically be understood like we are importing it from the index file of that folder. Okay, so let's save it and see. Okay, so as we can see, like we have the same UI, but in a much more specified manner. Okay, so I guess I am audible now. So let me know like if some part of what I've said is not completely audible. We'll repeat that. Okay, so like we have like simplified our app, like we have this complete app, right? So in this app, like we have this complete UI, so we can split it into multiple simple components so that each component has only one purpose, one specific task. Like this particular component here, the expense item, it has only one specific task, like it is receiving props and then performing like rendering those props here. Okay, so currently like we are not rendering anything, like this is not a reusable component really. So what we can do here is, um, yeah. So let's specify a list. Like let's first of all like create a JSON list, expense list. Okay. So we are going to get this, from the API in the upcoming sessions. So for now we can hard code it. Okay. So maybe the name is grocery. Amount is, I don't know, um, 44. Date is no date. So let's create a date, which is date is this and month is 12. Okay. So and is there anything? We are just taking this, or maybe some description. So currently we can make it empty for now. Okay. So the second is maybe mobile bill. I guess we can use a different amount. We can change the date even. Okay. So what we can do, we can, like we have seen, we have the expense list, right? Okay, so like while rendering this, while using this, so we may have to like make sure like it is, it may have some data. Otherwise, it might throw some error, like or show like zero, something like that. So we can put some checks like whether there is an expense list, and if it is, there is some data in that list, and then we can put the actual code, which is map, and we can have the item, the index, then we are returning the expense item, which takes the item prop, and we have to specify the key, right? So that React can identify each and every element in the list. Okay, so let's remove this. Let's say we can see like we have two list items, but the content is same because we have not really used the item prop which we are passing, right? So we can do that by just splitting, like destructure it. Okay, so we have the item and maybe some other functions which we are going to add later on. So let's say we want to handle the delete thing, right? We want to handle the edit thing. So what we can do, we can pass some functions from the parent to child and then perform some specific actions on these functions. Okay, so we have this, right? So what we can do, we have the item and we have the date. Okay, so what we can do is where date is the object. So we can just directly, I guess, go for this, get month, I guess, which is not really the month, which is just the month ID, I guess. Get date, I guess. Item dot, I guess the title, and here goes the amount. So let's cross verify like all the things we have used. Okay, so we have the name, not the title. So we have the name, amount, date, and description. We are not showing the description in the list. Okay, but we can like add some additional description so that we can know like if we are creating an expense tracker, so that there should be some description, right? So let's see. Okay, so get month is not a function. So let's see what is. Okay, so we are making use of the new date object, basically class. So it provides up some function. So we have this. Why not we able to use it? Okay, so let's skip that for now. Hard code the data and let's see where we are going wrong. Okay, so let's log the item here. Okay, so these are the previous errors which we were getting. Okay, so we have this date object. Okay, so can't we use anything here? Let's see. No, yes. Okay, so what we have to do, we are getting the date here, right? So we can do this. We can create a date object and we can put the date here, and then we can use this function get month. Okay, and then make use of this another date. Yes, you are right, JP. That was the error causing this. Thank you for pointing it out. Item dot date dot get month. Item dot date dot get date. I guess now it's fine. It's fine. So we are showing you zero here because like we are just getting the index of the date, basically the month. So what we can do here is I've implemented a function which is returning just the months. So we can do that. We can use that. So let me quickly copy it down here. Okay. So this is just a function and just passing the index and it is just returning the relative month name. Okay. So we can use this. So all of this is happening on the go. We can even send this parameter, or whenever the API is called, we can go through the list items and change the relative indexes with the respective months. Okay, so if we save it, let's see what we get. Okay, so we are getting the January. But, okay, maybe some issue with the time zone. Let's see, February. Yeah. Okay, 01. Okay. Okay. So let's say we have implemented this. The indexing is zero, I guess. Okay, great. So that's where like this four is basically the indexing. Okay, so fourth month means like the fourth index, which is May. Okay, so I guess we have implemented the list items. Like we are rendering all the expense items based on the list. Okay. Now this list can be asynchronous. Let's say we initially we don't have any sort of items, right? So we can put some loader or some, skeleton API, something like that, so that it will be like while the data is being rendered, so the user can know like the data is being fetched, so they have to wait for a while. Okay. So I guess we have splitted our. So if you can see, like each of these components has a very specific task, right? So this basically this page component, like the page expenses, it is also a component, but it's just the folder convention, like the folder structure I'm using here. Okay, so we have the header here and all the items, like we are passing the data and it is returning the JSX in an array which is being rendered. Okay, and this expense item, it just have a like the just a single function, right? A specific task to render all the things, all the items based on the props. Okay, we can even split it, like we can make a component for this, we can make a component for this. Okay, so that's totally up to you. If you want to split it down to a very granular way, you can do that. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. Okay, so now we see our app.js file. So now we see like we have this complete code, but we have make use of multiple different components, right? So we can even see the component tree. Okay, okay. The plugin has crashed. It is there. Now we can see all the structure that we are using, the app, the root level component we have, the sidebar component, which in turn contains the sidebar list item. And you can see the key here, right? So we can see the key here, like the props being passed from one component to another. Like it is just has a parent-child relationship. So we are passing this prop, and it is rendered by like it has the nested level, like on top there is like it is kind of a stack, right? So app which has a sidebar component, which in turn has this sidebar list item. Similarly, like the expenses, so like app has two child, basically two components. So a component can contain multiple components, right? So this is very basic and important concepts. So we are going to make use of components throughout, because React is all about components, as we know, right? Okay. So yeah, we have covered this. Like it has same syntax, and it is an important piece of puzzle when we have to communicate with other components. Okay. So I guess we have covered down the props. So, like, let's say if we want to handle some events, we can send some functions as well. Then that function can be called from the child components, because like the props are immutable. Like there is some internal state. Okay, so regarding the state, we are going to study about that in the next session. But let's say we have some state. State is mutable, because we can change the state based on certain actions. But props should not be changed directly from the child component. That we have to keep in mind. Otherwise, it will create some bugs, create some side effects, some sort of that. Okay. So if you guys have any questions from this, you can ask it. Okay, so let's go back and let's see the thinking in React. Okay, Let's zoom it a bit. So is it similar to Angular or little bit different? Yeah, like Angular is a framework and React is a JavaScript based library. So there's a difference. So React can be embedded into your existing web pages as well. And if you're creating an entire application, but as Angular is a framework, it cannot be embedded into your existing application. Okay. And okay, so according to like the React official documentation, it is the primary, premier way of to build fast web apps with JavaScript. Now, Facebook and Instagram is written on the React as well. Okay, so start with a mock. So we have this, let's say we have this UI. So if we have to think it in a React way, we have to split it down to, at a very granular level. So we have this. So we have multiple sections here. If we see, we have this filtering section, we have this complete table, which in turn has some headings, some rows, some highlighted area. So let's say we have this content, which we have in the JSON format, just a JavaScript object containing multiple objects. Okay, so now first we have to break the UI into the component hierarchy, like we have seen, like app, sidebar, which in turn contain expense, which in turn contain expense items. Okay, so first we are separating. Now, as I've said, like first we are splitting all the UI into separate components. Each component has a very specific task. Okay, now these are all the things. You can go through the documentation if you want to get in-depth knowledge, like how should we think when we are creating a UI. Now, as if you are like new to React, you should definitely go through these documentations because it will help you a lot. Okay, so first we have to split all the like the UI into multiple components. Okay, now secondly, like build a static version in React. So let's say we have this app. Okay, so initially we have created just a single row, dummy row, not the dynamic one, just a single row. Okay, so first we should like create the static part, then we make it dynamic. Okay, build a static version in React. Check. Okay, now props versus state, going to talk about in like we have the basic overview of that. Now identify the minimal but complete representation of the UI state. So first, like whenever you have componentized all the UI parts, then you have to look like how you are going to combine. Okay, then we have this identify where your state should live. So let's say we have some components where we have some state, a component where we don't have any sort of state. So we have state and stateful components, right? So we are going to have some stateful components which may contain some state. Let's say this particular screen, like this is the app in the end which we are going to build. Like initially the state is, let's say, it does not have any sort of item, but once it is fetched, the state changes. So does like it re-renders the component. Okay, so that is done by the React in a very efficient way, basically. Okay, then we have this add inverse data flow. So like the data flow, how the data should flow. Okay, so you can like go through the document and check like if there is any doubt you have. Okay, that's it, I guess. Good. Let's go back. Okay, so I guess we have covered few of the main topics in this session. So if you guys any sort of questions, we can go ahead, or otherwise we can conclude the session. Okay. So like for all this code, I'll push it to the GitHub repo so you guys can check it out if you want to. Okay. So you can like the best way is like you can code along. Like once the session is over, you can also like go through all the topics. So like if you are new to React, so it will really be helpful. Okay, and you can even fork the GitHub repository and do some code. So if there are any errors or issues, you can raise that. You can create the PRs, and I'll check it out and get back to you. Okay. So I guess we are done with the session. Yeah, just a second. Okay. Okay. Again, thanks, JP, for pointing it out. Okay. So I guess we have completed all the topics that we want to cover. Okay. So I guess we can conclude this session. Okay. So Have a good day, guys. Bye and stay safe. Right.